This episode of Skirmish Supremacy is brought to you by Reformation Brewery, the official beer of your game night.
That laugh captured.
Which one? The evil laugh?
that one right there. As you say, oh, well, you are the perfect guest then.
So it's Nick and Tim. Just checking names again. It's Nick and Tim, isn't it?
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, there you go.
I would say normally the bearded one is Nick and the not bearded one is Tim. But we both have beards right now, so Nick's got glasses and a white shirt on.
You have your name there. Nick just has Skirmish.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. That happens. All right. Well, Tim, do you want to do the intro or do you want me to?
Well, you got control of the button tonight, the almighty button, so it's going to be on you.
Yeah, but I clicked the button already.
Yeah.
So
do the intro.
Well, fine. I'll do the intro then. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, or morning, or whatever other time of day you decided to listen to the podcast, the show. I'm already forgetting words. Joining me today is Tim, our ever-present and pain in the ass host.
That's right, everybody.
And then joining us is Mike Thorpe, and he has the game Anyaral. I may butcher it, but Anyaral, the Twilight.
World of Twilight.
The World of Twilight. Oh my goodness. I had it in the corner, and then I had clicked something. Because
that's a great intro. Thank you.
Because I always have to do that. But welcome, Mike.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Well, yeah, Mike, I know you said that before we started recording, this is your first time doing a podcast like this. So we are already doing this off to a great start, as you noticed. So
excellent.
Hey, this is Skirmish Supremacy normal.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Very much so.
Got character.
Exactly. So, Mike, tell us a little bit about, am I pronouncing it right? Anyaral.
Anyaral.
Anyaral. Okay, I just
I did it right.
You got it spot on.
All right.
Yeah.
So if you want to tell us a little bit about the world, the story.
Okay. Yep, will do. So I've been working on, don't know how long now, since about the year 2000, a bit before. And it's a fantasy setting, and I started from the principle of start from something that's completely not Tolkien inspired. Then got carried away saying no humans, no real magic. So created, doing it with ideas, came with these little creatures, little nocturnal hoofed creatures called Fubani, and they're kind of the protagonists of the world. Continued growing from there. So the Fubani live and have their empire on the world of Anyaral, and they were enslaved by a race of predatory, sort of velociraptor style, or sort of sentient velociraptor-ish creatures who used to hunt them and enslave them. Eventually they overthrew them, and that's kind of the starting of the world. This vast empire across the continent, who used to rule are now living on the outskirts, but still pretty awesome hunters, preying on these little cute-ish Fubani. And then, so that was kind of the essence of the world.
Yes. So the one thing I definitely want to say about it is, like, the first time I saw the miniatures and the art, I was like, this is very Jim Henson-esque. Was that intentional?
It's hard to say now. It all started such a long time ago. He was obviously inspired by Jim Henson. Grew up with the likes of the Labyrinth and the Dark Crystal. love the kind of, I think that's kind of gone deeply into my subconscious of that's how a fantasy world should feel. And it's, so yes, there are times when I've deliberately kind of channeled that and done little engineer dudes that be living in Dark Crystal. But other times I've just drawn from other sources, mostly stuff. Quite often people have gone, "Oh, is this what you drew it from?" And I go, "Oh, I suppose that's probably it." Rather than deliberately trying to copy stuff. If anything, I was trying very, very hard to create something that was as uninspired by other stuff as possible, and have realized over the years that it's very hard not to be a magpie and draw on other things.
Yeah, I think at this point the fantasy genre has been around a long enough time that no matter what, everything you do is going to be inspired by something else, even if you're not directly copying it, obviously. But yeah, you're always going to have those influences from, especially in this case, your childhood, directing you how you want to do the game.
Yes, I think that's a fair comment.
Yeah. So you were telling us a little bit about the world itself. So the game itself, from what I've seen on the website, it looks like you are definitely you're trying something different. So the one thing I noticed is this game doesn't use dice at all.
Yes. When I started, I probably would try to decided to make life difficult for myself in as many ways as possible. The game itself, I wanted to get away from the normal D6s, D20s that most games at the time seemed to use. And I figured actually an awful lot of what you're rolling is just a toss of a coin. And you could play around with something clever and different. The idea of these essentially little M&N tile dice with a symbol on one side, blank on the other. By having several of those, you could have lots of different options. So I built up the idea of a combat stones. So you have two different types. You have attack and defense. So when you want to have a combat, you get to choose how aggressive or defensive you are. Select the right number of stones. You both cast them at the same time. Then you balance against the attacks and defenses and see if you get any blows through.
Okay. So the symbol would be like a success and the blank side would be a success or fail. Gotcha. Okay.
Yes. So it's a simple two-sided dice, success or fail, of two different types, either attack and defense.
Okay, cool. So in the whole system runs off of that. So I take it every model has like a certain amount of, like their attack might be 3, their defense is 2, or vice versa, or something along those lines.
They have each character has a single stat for combat, which is might be combat 3, and that could be 3 attack, 3 defense, or any combination thereof, which tends to be 1. So if there's a combat, you'll have the primary combatants, somebody attacks the other person, and that gives them a certain number of stones, and then other models engaged can throw in their support stones. You can then you'll build up a pool of stones. You choose attack and defense. Your opponent does the same. So you maybe wanted to go completely aggressive, but you're leaving yourself wide open for. And the idea being that this is very much medievalish game where close combat is very important. But
right.
that is the main essence of it. There's a certain degree of bluffing on which stones you're going to play. And having cast the stones, there are then generally abilities to allow you to recast them, to use special abilities to force your opponent to recast stones. And so it opens up quite a lot of back and forth on a single small combat.
Right. So I can see how that would work out. That's actually a pretty good idea because, again, you're still adding the random element of dice, but you're doing it in a much more simplistic way. So in this case, you were literally chucking rocks at your opponent.
Probably not at your opponent. They're casting metal, so they're probably quite painful.
So the first person that says "ow" wins or loses.
Instead, we give little cups to try and keep the stones in a single place.
He doesn't like how we're trying to improve his game.
Yeah,
we're talking the violent bar version, but anyway. So.
That's what you do if you lose and your character dies. I also built into it a mechanism for something called stamina. So this is a resource that the Devanu will have, say, 6 stamina at the start of the game. And they can spend them as quickly as they like, but each turn they only get 1 back. Devanu is very, very effective until it gets tired. So when you're playing as the Fubani, they're little, they really aren't very effective unless there's a whole group of them. But all they're trying to generally do is tire out the Devanu until eventually they can put it down. So the Devanu has the stamina which allows it to do things like recast stones, cast extra stones, leap into combat, sprint across the battlefield. So the Devanu are very much trying to manage how to efficiently hunt down their prey without too much, which makes for, from their perspective, and when things start going wrong, the stones don't fall the way they want to. They end up suddenly tiring themselves out just trying to get some good rolls.
Ouch. Yeah,
So,
I can see how that would.
It allows, again, the idea is to give both players options at each stage, so they can feel they're really, when it all goes horribly wrong, yes, you can blame the stones, but at least you know decisions along the way rather than just making 1 dice roll and then seeing what happens.
Nice. Okay, so that makes sense. So, like in their case, for example, they're very much a high risk, high reward faction. They've got a lot of the stamina; they could do a lot with it. But if they overexpose themselves, they're going to go down quick.
Yes.
Nice. So
the
you
balance
mentioned
of the game is.
Oh no, go ahead.
Well, one of the other things that I wanted to set myself as again challenge: electric forces. So the Devanu typically in a force. That when I run my little normal intro game, Devanu and 3 of their hunting beasts, the Grishak. And the other side will have the Empire, which will have a unit of, say, 6 militia and a little engineer or something like that. So you have very, very imbalanced forces. And at first glance, the Devanu are capable of sprinting across the entire table in 1 turn if you don't mind completely tiring them out. Most of the models without any difficulty. But there's only a single point if they died, and that's game over. So you have 2 very, very different play styles. And as I've expanded the world with new races, each of them have a very distinct feel.
Okay. So overall, how many races or I guess factions are there to the game?
That's a very good question. So we have the Emperor and the Devanu with the original ones. I added the Delgon as the they live in the mountainous north. Probably should have said south, but I chose north at the time. And they are gods have come to them, who are these giant, similar to Fobani, but about twice the height and huge, almost elephant-like creatures. And so that was another culture, and they basically decided to invade the Empire, so they're pretty much the antagonists to the story. Who were done as an expansion to the Delgon. But see, they were kind of meant to be allies and just a small little bit, but people seem to like them. They're more the nomadic, slightly less civilized than their Delgon neighbors that live in the mountains around them. The Kasani, which I launched a couple of years ago, who are half Fubani, as part of the Fubani race, but they are much more elegant. They ride lots of cool big beasts. I wanted an excuse to sculpt big beasts, so
every game should have that option. So
yeah, I'm building the world. If I want to have nice big dinosaur type creatures, I'm going to have big dinosaur type creatures. Main 5 cultures, and then I'm working on a new one, which are the Kadashi, which are sort of like the fairies that live in the forest, the thing that you're scared of, or the reason you don't go into forests to these creatures. Filter of Twilight. So they're small bat-like creatures that come in mass swarms to anybody that tries to invade their lands. I'm having a lot of fun with them at the moment, and they've been around for a long time since the first started sketching out the random little races. They've changed a lot since then, but they're kind of like the last piece in the jigsaw that I came up with almost 20 years ago. The main 6 races, 6 cultures, and then there are subcultures, especially on the Empire. So you've got the core Empire, you've got their knights who are there to fight the Devanu. Then there are the big hardy northern Engu who are constantly fighting the Dogu. And You've got the nobles who are preposterously dressed, very highly trained guards for the nobles themselves, who are just wealthy individuals who don't really like the idea of combat, but will like having really well-dressed just to make them look good. So I'm sure I've missed several others there, but I've had quite fun building on, just kind of focusing on little areas that, as time has gone by, I've gone, right, this is a story I can tell, and I can build a little force around this idea, but very much falling within the Empire. And the Empire's essentially what would be the closest to the humans. They're the most easy to relate to. They kind of want you to assume are the good guys. So, yeah,
they kind of want you to assume they're the good guys.
The good guys. But I think they're the good guys as much as humans are, or Europeans are, or have been historically. They're very, very broad.
I'm looking at the nobles right now. I really like them. They all got mohawks.
Crested helmets, but yes. Yeah.
Yes, crested helmets.
They need something ridiculous about them and pompous. I think they... I got another guy to help sculpt most of the models. I've sculpted myself. But another sculptor called Mark Craggs has helped me at various times. And I've commissioned a few sculpts from him. So the original noble guard are his creation. Sort of, I sketched something, he sculpted something that's not as the same as I wanted to, and it helps to flesh out the world and give that slightly different perspective. I gave him drawings for a noble guard, and he delivered. Recently, I've added some cavalry for them. Match his sculpting style and make it all grow quite nicely. So I'm quite pleased with the Tolerant cavalry.
I do like them. I really like the mounts that they're on because they're slightly different than almost all the other mounts that you've done.
Yes, it's trying very hard not to become too inspired by your own things. So I don't want every single mount to look like, they call it a nuke, the mounts that the knights ride. And so for a while there were a lot of a nuke variants thereof, and it's like Tolerant to look something, again, slightly preposterous with their huge long noses and everything, but and they've got similarities with the bipedal little tails and things, but again, just trying to feel a bit different.
Right, and they seem much slimmer, and then they I think you mentioned it, but they've got a longer nose or mouth. Just feel a little bit sleeker than almost everything else that I've seen so far, because
have a look at the Kasani if you've got them. Yeah, I'd recommend having a look at the Kasani if you want something a bit more. They were deliberately trying to be quite elegant. Inspired by Native Americans or African tribesmen. So they live near the Empire, and they're sort of, I think the Empire would say that the Kasani territories are part of theirs. Ignore the Empire and carry on doing what they were going to do anyway. So, they have thing was a lot of cavalry and a lot of fun beasts and creatures.
They do. I do like the Kasani, looking at them.
I gotta say that I am actually, I'm looking at some of the Dogu right now, and the Yurnak, which is like this big weird giraffe monkey thing. I don't know how else to put it. It's like a cross between a giraffe, a monkey, and a yak.
Yeah, it's got a little tauntaun in there too. Come on.
Yeah, it's like a little bit of tauntaun. But like I really like the look of that model. I don't know what it is. I think it's just kind of like the gangly swooping down head. And like,
yes.
Something about that model just speaks to me. I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it, but I'm looking at that going, yes.
Though how can you go past the Yartane and not say something about giant bird creatures that are on two legs and all furry?
Well, this is also true.
Yep.
But these things are awesome.
Yeah. So one of the things I did notice is that most of your beasts and your cavalry, they don't have arms. Like they kind of have like, I don't want to say chicken bodies, but like they kind of look like big lizard chickens without like arms or wings.
Yes, it was just an aesthetic that I kind of, when I started drawing these ones, you had the right, as it's very much a case of I will start drawing and just see what feels right.
Right.
And yes, at the time, a few of the creatures didn't ended up with, or they kind of started with arms, then went down to small vestigial arms, and then kind of thought it looks quite nice without them. So yes, like the Enuk, I assume they just got a very good sense of balance. But yeah.
Oh man, I just found the Dom pack. That thing is awesome.
Yes, I'm quite pleased with that one. It's one of my favorite sculpts.
Yes, with the riders hanging off of it. So it's a big, I would say, just as kind of a reference, a Brontosaurus, but it has a beak. But
yes.
It's supposed to be kind of big. It's got bigger forelegs than the rear legs, and it's just,
that's one of those situations where I thought, because looking at dinosaurs, you normally see the Diplodocus or static legs. All right, I would quite like the long legs and the short back legs and long swooping tail. So I kind of developed that one, and a long time after that, I found out I was looking at something on dinosaurs. I think it's Brachiosaur, which means long front legs. Like, okay, so I basically designed a Brachiosaur. But so it's got its own take on the head and everything. But yeah, if you look at a Brachiosaur, it's got a very similar body shape. Again, you try very hard to create something new, and you end up finding that you've stolen something that already exists or reinvented something.
Yeah, so it's been a while actually, but I in one of our previous episodes I was talking about that because we had I believe it was Jim Pinto on, and we were talking about creating stuff, and there's been more than once where I'm like, I have a great idea, can't think of where I found it, start putting all this work into it, and then at some point stumble across something there, I'm like, and that was probably where I originally saw it and forgot about it and thought it was a good idea, and then it popped in my head again.
So far, I think as a whole, Twilight feels unique. I kind of like the fact that I can look back at it and see where I got the references from, and I think that helps with actually get involved. Because I think if you create something that's too out there, people look at it and go, I have no frame of reference.
Right.
At Twilight and go, yes, Dark Crystal, even if it's then goes off in very much a tangent. But it gives people that initial feeling that it's at least slightly familiar. I do have, I can't shy too far away from that level of inspiration.
Right. But at the same time, having that frame of reference also allows you to say, okay, I don't want it to be too similar to this, so how do I go about making it different in a way that makes sense for what I want?
Yeah. I think my life particularly difficult was removing magic, or any explicit magic from the world. It's kind of like, I like the idea that they have the same magic, same sort of level of magic, maybe slightly more, but the same sort of stuff that we have on Earth, which is people believe stuff, people have their views of what's real and what's not. That kind of, the Fubani will have the same. They'll have superstitions, they'll have things they believe, but they're not going to have people running around throwing fireballs or very obvious spells. I've always said that, but then I have some of the machinery which I know full well requires a bit of imaginate, or probably a bit of sort of magic to make them work, like the mechanical legs on the Delgon Striders and things like that. I know. So I always feel I've cheated a little bit on those, but I think a friend refers to it as the rule of cool.
Exactly. It's your world. Like, at this point, we're all just playing in it, is what it comes down to.
Yeah, it's a big, big sandpit that I use as my excuse to do the creative stuff that I want to do.
Right, and it makes perfect sense. So, as far as that goes, like you've got a lot of character to all of the models. Like, and that's something I can really appreciate. You know, like Nick was saying, like the Dom Pack riders, where it's like you've got this big Brontosaurus looking thing, and there's guys literally hanging off of ropes with little spike clubs, and like it has a lot of flavor to it. Now I take it with so much story that you're jamming into the characters. This isn't just a game where you line up your models, I line up mine, we march across the field, meet in the middle, and just swing until one of us goes down. So yeah, so there's probably a lot of skirmish based play that goes on, like scenarios.
It's always felt like a thing. Yeah, I've written. Yes, all the rule books and stuff have lots of little scenarios that people can try out, and it's always wanted to be a very much storytelling game. And I think the thing I've found over the years that's always kind of made it very rewarding is that when the people I've seen who end up playing or who play Twilight and get very enthusiastic about it, all seem genuinely very nice, very open. It doesn't attract the hugely competitive players, which is probably no surprise when you've got little Muppety type creatures as the main protagonists, but it's got people who want to play scenarios, want to tell stories with the games they're playing, line up two big armies and see who falls down first.
Right. Which makes sense. I mean, I definitely, again, our podcast is Skirmish Supremacy. Nick and I very much prefer the smaller model games where we feel like we're not just shooting each other in the face, but we're telling a story while we're playing. So any type of scenario based gameplay definitely attracts us a lot more to the game outside of just, well, let's see how many kills we can get.
Yes.
Story is, all of my favorite gaming experiences are when I translate even a loss into a story. It's something, something crazy that happens, something fun, anything like that. So, seeing this, and, one of the other things on the miniatures I wanted to comment on, you said, you've been working on this since somewhere around 2000, going on 20 years now. And, there's new factions, there's old factions, but you've managed to keep the same look, that kind of puppety, look that feels very Jim Henson, even if that wasn't the original inspiration. And, it does give that, feeling of narrative, of story, of unity that, sometimes gets lost across larger games or, other games where, skills have increased, but not all the models have kept up with it.
I guess that's the one advantage I've got in having pretty much done myself on it. It's got one pair of hands, one creative source. So everything is building upon my original ideas, and where people have been an immense help, and quite a few of the core cultures are forum and sort of said, does anybody want to help make a culture? Do you want to make your mark on the world? And so people came in, the Knights of RL, Chris Parry sort of said, oh, here's my idea, here are my characters. And so I pulled that in and kind of expanded upon his build from that. So it's been great having other creative inputs that have then get run through my filter to fit within the world. But it gives that slightly different perspective, which I think is a great feel of it, and one of the nice things about the community that's been built up over the years, that people can feel that they can actually have an input around that wouldn't be in the game if it wasn't for friends who've sort of said, oh, how about this random idea that's then been pulled in.
That is awesome.
So how many scenarios do you have overall? Because I was just kind of looking around a little bit, and you've got some that were put up on the website as kind of like some free downloads and whatnot, like Twilight Traveler and I'm sorry, Twilight Traveler is the magazine, but there's multiple scenarios. How many have you written so far?
Yeah, it's been a long time. I'm trying to remember. There's something like, I want to say about 12, 14 or so in the main book. So basically, the way I ended up writing the book was originally sort of I kind of revisited and tried to release, or decided to release the game as a proper game, and so resculpted all the models, released it through a company called Hassle Free, and they kind of helped give me that initial step. So I did a little book. It was about 24 pages. It had, I think, 3 scenarios in it, and it just had the Fubani and the Devanu, just a simple, those 2 forces, and a handful of models. And then as I sculpted more things, I ended up doing a second book, and then a third book, and then pulled all that together into a single compiled. That's the main book that's now that I sell, that has all the main rules in. But it's basically those 3 books plus a bunch of stuff I did on the side with the Travelers. All right, I have a model. I have ideas for rules. How do I get them out to people so that they can actually play with the models they bought? So that's the main purpose of the Traveler. As far as actual scenarios go, there's 20, 30, something like that. Probably 20 to 25 actually published in the main book. Then I've done a compiled Traveler, which pulls together all the rest of the bits from the Traveler. Gaps from when I released the main book to when I released the Traveler. And then there's another one for the Kasani. And I'm currently working on...
Which is actually, that's quite an impressive amount of scenarios, because most games when they come out, like your core book, you're looking at maybe, I don't know, Nick, what would you say, 6 to 10 per book typically? 10's usually on the high side?
10 would definitely be on the high side.
So the fact that you've already got, as a one-man team, you've already got 20, almost 25 scenarios, that's pretty breakneck as far as like the speed at which it's all coming out. So,
well, that's about one scenario every. It comes out. Yes, it's working on everything slowly and build. It's always been a case of very, very slowly building everything up, and pulling in new ideas and trying to flesh them out as they come. So it's wanting to have scenarios. Most of the scenarios have specific, but you could play them with different ones. So I've tried. Certainly when doing the new book or the original new book, I sort of made sure that each of the main cultures fit into different scenarios, sort of to try and make sure their stories were told. But you could easily swap in the different starter forces into different scenarios.
Right. So that you're not necessarily required to play with the models listed, but you could do other things in there as well.
Yeah. And
cool.
Most of the scenarios are around. When I looked at all the forces, I tried to create a nice simple. It's a force, costs about £30, and will give you a fully playable force that's any of the other forces of that size. So for each of the main cultures, there's a force you can just pick up and buy, which allows you to. So that kind of tends to be around this kind of 300-point level, which is a fairly arbitrary score balance. But it's a nice long. It's got a couple of units of models or a few big creatures or something, and most things you can use in a game are about that size. And so what I've tended to end up doing is just to play. You can grow, and it plays perfectly well, scaling up to. We played a couple of 1,000-point games at sort of Twilight days that we do every year or so. Actually, a lot of the people who I know who play love this kind of this small size games and having different forces that they can then try.
Right. Because I was gonna say there's a couple like unique models that I noticed. I'm assuming are heroes. Like there's one for the why am I forgetting the name all of a sudden? The Dogu, he is like this monstrous 250 point.
He's God.
Yeah,
well, they think he's God anyway.
Yeah, he's just enormous. Roban the Hunter is his name. That was the one I was looking at.
Yes, those are the Inari. They've been inherent to the story for a long time. There was a bit of me that kind of went. You look in most games where you have the ogres in the background are the big hulking, ridiculously class citizens, big and hulking and stupid. And the main thing I was thinking is, actually, they've got a lot more presence. These guys probably live much funnier concerned. They're almost immortal. So, how do you distinguish that from a god? So they worship them thoroughly, and they get quite good fun on the battlefield because they are, as you say, monstrous, but not stupid.
Right. Because, yeah, in this one in particular, Roban the Hunter was the one I was looking at. You were saying like 300 points is kind of like your intro level.
He's a challenge to get into the game.
Yeah.
He's more, yeah, you'd probably struggle to use him in a normal small game because he's either too many points sunk in one place and it's probably very hard for anything to kill him, and it doesn't make for that fun a game. But if you go slightly larger, then he becomes core, and either the opponent tries to work around him and tie him up, or tries to take him out, which is possible, and quite embarrassing when it happens.
I was going to say, I can imagine with a model that many points that if he goes down, you probably left him really exposed.
There's so what I did for I've done 2 Anari so far. I kind of want to do more of them, but the second one is Deran. He's actually more with the Dogu, who are more the nomadic cousins of the Delgon. I played a bit more with the rules on him to make him more of a liability. So he automatically leaps. He'll just charge straight into combat. He always activates first, and will always try to get into a fight. So you're more likely to. Yes, he's very effective, but he's a high liability person model to have in your force because he's got a very good chance of dying. And both of them have the rules that if they die, then you can't win, or possibly you lose, depending on the yeah. You can take them, but if you get your god killed, it doesn't matter what your objectives are. It doesn't matter what your opponent done. You failed. You're not going home happily. So yeah, they are a couple of linchpin models like that. So it's trying to take a model would probably be too expensive otherwise, but put enough liabilities in it to make it play in a smaller game.
Right.
So you can take him, but he's a risk.
So most of these miniatures, I'm assuming, are kind of fall within the 28 to 32 millimeter range. How big is Roban compared to them if your typical model is like that 28 to 32 range?
The Fubani themselves are short. They're kind of 23 mil, depending on some of them are bigger. But I'm trying to think how tall Roban is now. He's 5 or 6 centimeters tall, I think. Don't think that's too far off. So he's a big model. He's standing, for reference, he's standing on a 50 millimeter base when you see the picture. So yeah, he definitely towers over anything else on the table, apart from maybe the Dom pack. But
nice.
Yeah, so it's fun having. One thing I always wanted, I love differences in scale, because I tend to find that when I go into London every day for work, and you see the difference in people, range in heights that you're seeing, people from 5 foot up to almost 7 foot, and huge different size and volume, and that's just people. That's humans, and we kind of miniatures tend to be all 28 mil, 32, whatever they are now. Generally, they're all about the same size.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I always get a kick out of that when I go into these different groups and people are arguing over the minutia between, well, this is a 25 millimeter miniature compared to this, which is a 32 millimeter heroic and all of that. And they're like, well, I want my characters to be uniform across the board. I'm like, but we're all so different. Like Nick and I, compared to most people, are short. So, when you factor that in, like it's just such a weird thing to hear because I've seen it on a lot of groups where it's like they expect all their miniatures to not only have the same uniforms, but they also expect them to be exactly 6 foot tall.
So I would say, especially when it comes to scales like this, that the one challenge there is, when you're looking at minis, you may have somebody that's taller, but if they're really slight of build but taller, that's usually the big thing between 28 and 32 mil is that, or, a 28 and a heroic, is that one just doesn't, they don't have the same presence.
Right.
Yeah,
you know,
Typically one has hands like a gorilla.
Yeah, you know, so that's usually more where, you know, I you know, at least see the issue, or not issue, but I go, do I really want to run this and that? Because, you know, they, you know, how they look together usually conflicts. You know, it's not got the same uniformity that, you know, you would expect from something that's just taller but sculpted by the same person.
Very true. Very
yes.
true.
Sculptors all have different styles to them. Let's say, again, I have the advantage that most of my stuff's sculpted by me. So, if however it looks, people just have to accept that that's right. I might be looking going, that's proportions are a bit off. Anybody else looks and goes, no, that's obviously right because you sculpted it. It's a bit of a cheat.
Exactly. Then you just have to have the conviction to say, yeah, that's right. I sculpted it. Therefore, it is correct. This is my world.
Yeah.
You're all just playing in it. You just got to keep saying that over and over and over again. Because again, if you were the primary person working on it, there's nobody to tell you no.
No, but I think, as you said, when you're looking at it, it feels consistent. So I kind of hold myself to quite strict rules as to what I think looks right, and where I think where I deliberately break things. Sometimes I'll get it wrong. Scale creeps inevitable when you're doing traditional sculpting. It's very hard not to have models grow. When you sculpt a model, you build the armature, and you build it about the size of the model you're copying, and then you finish it and it's about 10% bigger. So it's kind of something that anybody who's done traditional sculpting will kind of sculpt and go, put it next to the original one and you find it bulkier. So over the years, that's something that I've had to rely on, because otherwise the models just keep getting bigger and bigger, bulkier.
Right.
And you end up with, as long as it's intentional, great. But
yeah, then you end up with just a whole bunch of models hanging over 50 millimeter bases.
And
yeah,
you know,
we've all seen it.
And I was gonna say, and you'll have people who will call you out when your earlier stuff is this size and your current stuff is this size. Actually, I recently had that happen with some stuff from Trey Manor with Redbox Games. Well, before Adepticon, he's up the scale on some of his guys, and I had some of his earlier guys I was going to mix with them, but they just look like little short guys.
Yeah,
I was like,
I can remember he had great difficulties. Yeah, I can remember he had difficulties with choosing his scale. I think. Because he started sculpting at one scale, and then realized that people wanted to buy models and interact with other things. So he's probably slowly shifted his scale, so it's a bit more in the middle.
Yeah, right. And you know, he's coming out with all new stuff and things like that. So you know, but it was kind of funny because you know I set him and I'm like, there is something really weird here, and it took a while to figure out what it was. You know, it wasn't like it was drastically different, but it was just enough that it was like there's just something not the same.
Yeah, they don't quite mesh together.
Right. So the other thing I definitely noticed is you have a ton of just big beasts that don't look like they're tied to any faction whatsoever. How do they play into the game?
There's been a certain point when I've sculpted things that I just want to sculpt.
Which also makes sense.
So, yeah, sometimes the beasts are great. My main excuse is they're great for scenarios. You can, for the Kasani, I had right from the offset, I had the image of I don't know if you've ever seen Jurassic Park 2, already. There is a sequence where there's a whole herd of dinosaurs being chased by a bunch of guys on cars and motorbikes, and it's just a fantastic running battle going on.
Yeah.
So it's sat on the back of my mind. At Kasani, I wanted to have a big pile of beasts running, no riders on them, and then the Kasani riding their beasts in and out of the stampede, and Devanu picking at the sides. So you just have this big running battle, the Devanu trying to hunt the big beasts and the Kasani protecting them. And so pretty much I've been working towards that one for about 10 years. So I eventually sculpted the big creatures. So you've got the Donpaku in the center, you've got the Erelai, who are pretty much Gallimimuses from Jurassic Park again. And the idea you can now do this big scenario with those down the middle. We ran it at Salute one year, and allowed people to play as Kasani, protecting it, and a few people to play as Davanu, trying to hunt. So different objectives from both sides. But it was a lot of fun just to have that. Finally, after however many years, this one big scenario, lots of people playing, and the players rolling in and out as it went along. It worked out quite well, I think, in the end. But so yes, so big beasts. You can hunt them. That's about the only excuse I've got, other than I wanted to make them.
Well, I wanted to make them is a perfectly legitimate reason. So
yeah. It's the same reason I have rather more civilians than I need in the game, because the civilians are a lot of fun to sculpt. So yes, they work perfectly well as objectives, and sometimes I've given them rules that make them useful and to some extent have a purpose in the game. Just they're fun to sculpt, they're characters, they add to the world, and if people want to use them in games, they can. They just act as they flesh the world out.
Right. Which, it definitely makes sense. And it's always something that later on you can fall back on and be like, you know what, I'm finally going to stat this thing up and just do it and just throw it into a game. Make something that just cattle prods monsters and you're good to go.
Pretty much. A long time ago, I did a creature design contest on our forum. Don't know how many years ago it was now. And the winner of that one was a creature referred to as the Pre-Pre. And it was the design my friend came up with was it's a funny little pet that's been bred for this enormous horn or enormous crest on the back of its head by the nobles, selectively bred just to look ridiculous, like a little pet dog. And so I sketched a little picture of it, and that one ended up winning the contest. Later I sculpted it. So this tiny little Pre-Pre has been around for years and seems to catch people's imagination just because it's so ridiculous with this huge on its back and a tiny little body. And finally, with the most recent things, I've come up with rules for it with negative points, because it's basically, if you put it on the battlefield, if it dies, it's obviously a negative to it affects the morale of the force to have a negative cost, so you can buy a bodyguard for it. Extra models in the force, and it's just an excuse to have this little guy on there. So everybody going to go, oh, that's correct, takes it, and then spends the rest of the game trying to make sure it doesn't get eaten. So,
oh, wait.
As you say, random models, eventually it's got a purpose in the game. I'm not sure anybody will ever use it, but it's there.
You've got a mushroom farmer. I know what I need to buy now.
Got a mushroom farmer. He's quite scary looking, but yes. Mushrooms are obviously a little bit toxic around where they are, all the spores and things. So, pretty sure.
So recently I've been painting mushrooms from
there we go.
From Gravelcast. So I've been on a definite mushroom kick lately. So the flying creatures that you have, the ones I think you referenced them as
Kadashi.
Yeah. So there's the falconer guy that has a couple of them. And I was noticing that all their bases have little mushrooms on them. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. I just have to have those because mushrooms.
But yes, there have always been mushrooms for some reason. From whenever I did the initial sketches, there have been little mushrooms in the corners, and the book has quite a few random mushrooms spread through just to encourage you there. Not got to that many mushrooms, but they tend to fit. So any of the pictures of bits will tend to have little mushrooms hiding somewhere.
That's awesome. Because mushrooms are awesome. Now, I don't know if it actually got said at the beginning or not, but what size board do you play the game on?
It's a good question. I would, for simplicity, I'd probably say a 4x4 is perfectly big enough. 3 foot by 3 foot you could also play on. At Salute, which tends to be the one show we do each year, I've got this I think it's a 3.5 foot diameter round board that we always use at shows. Tree on it, and that's quite eye-catching. But you don't tend to use the corners. So most of when I do scenarios, I tend to say measure distances from the middle, or for a generic, if you just want to put models down on the table, I tend to have rules in there that just say deploy somewhere on the table that's more than 18 inches from any enemy models. And that allows you to make use of the table rather than just going, it's a 4 foot by 4 foot table, line up opposite sides. I tend to be a bit more fluid than that, just choose somewhere on the table. So as long as you've got enough space around it. So a small table works fine.
That is definitely really different than what you normally have in a game.
He's going straight Maverick on that one.
Right? I mean, that at first I was like, how can you but then I was like, but I like it because it's so much more, especially with the scenarios and stuff like that, you can totally set up for that and just moving around a little bit. It does add just kind of that variety to every game, because you aren't confined to one little 6, 8, 12-inch box or line.
Yeah. Yes, so that was good. It allows you to pick your battles a bit. So if the table has an area of woodland, you can choose to set up in that, even if it's not in a deployment zone. Your opponent has a bit of a has to learn how to choose how to counter that. I think the other sort of my standard deployment is you can choose whether to deploy all your models in one go or whether to deploy one set and then deploy another set in different areas of the battlefield to try and control it. I think the one aspect of the rules that I've not mentioned, although we haven't talked about so far, is when it comes to unit activation. Because this was another one that when I was looking at it going, all right, I don't really like the idea of my force goes, your force goes, which was certainly around 2000, pretty much all the games. That was the kind of standard rule sets.
Most still do that to this day.
Yeah, there's a lot of them there. There's a lot more clever things now. There are so many different games available. But the idea I ended up settling for was each side has 6 initiative counters, which they put in a bag, along with 2 combat counters. So you have a bag with all the counters in, you draw 1 counter out, and that allows whoever's counter it is gets to activate 1 model. Then the individual models, so things like captains might say you can activate up to 6 models within your command range. Or commander, you can activate up to 6 captains and other ranked ones as well. So you can end up having command structure within your forces. Skirmish, it's pretty much captains. The Diviner will have beast handlers so they can activate their beasts with them. So you select a group of models to activate and then you move them all. And so that might mean you get to move everything together. It might mean that you're suddenly waiting for one of your stones to be drawn, so it can be quite tense. Those are 2 combat stones. So if a combat counter is drawn, then you immediately, everything that's engaged in combat fights. So most combats happen within the combat phase. So everything fights, and then you carry on drawing stones. And when the second combat stone's been drawn, the turn ends. So sometimes you'll kind of hang back and go, right, I want to wait and see what my opponent does first, but you'll leave it too long, come out, and then you don't get to move. And then the next turn happens. Your models just got distracted by some pretty flowers or pretty mushrooms. Do anything that turn. So both sides are trying to choose when to play. So I think it's quite doing it, but I think it kind of adds to the slightly quirky feel of the game and opens up some interesting strategies when you're trying to decide which models to do, how you build your force so that you can activate it using as few of those stones as possible in a coherent force.
Right. I kind of like that. It makes weighing out what I'm going to do a lot more than just, well, I know if I activate this model, then he can potentially throw either this model or this model at me this next turn.
Yeah. So sometimes it feels a bit random when everything goes against you, but it plays out quite well. I think people have always found that quite as a of it. Although it is quite frustrating when you're watching it going, all right, now I'm ready to move, and then you just don't see your counters coming out. But so many things in this game rest on a roll of a dice or cast of a stone, so it's just another slightly means you can't completely know what's going to happen on the battlefield.
I definitely like that aspect to it. So let's see here. I think we have pretty much covered everything there is to say about the game. Mike, where exactly can everybody find you online?
You can find me at www.worldoftwilight.com, or that's the actual website, which is in the process of having an overhaul, but it's quite out of date. But everything's on there, including the store. Anyaral Facebook group, which involves trying to spell Anyaral, which is the only downside of making it words.
Right.
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So I take it you don't deal in the Twitter and the Instagram and all that, just pretty much the website and the Facebook?
There is a Twitter account, which is at Twilight Minis, that a friend maintains. And but I've not delved too deeply into it, Instagram or Twitter. I can just about cope with Facebook. Works well. There's a forum as well, but that's all on the main side.
Right. Excellent. Nick, is there anything else you want to throw in there last minute? Because I think we pretty much covered everything there is to see about this game. I just want to see it put on the table.
I definitely want to see it put on the table because there's so much character. And actually talking about the character, as I was flipping through, I came across Engineer Beru. I think he's in the Civilians of the Empire. And it's just hilarious how, kind of different it is. He's got goggles on his eyes. He's got this helmet and goggles on his eyes and stuff like that. So, it's just so fun and, different to see, it's because it, both, on one side, kind of like you mentioned earlier, kind of looks like puppets. So feels lighthearted, but at the same time, it's very serious, and there's some seriously cool creatures in here, such as, where did it go? I had it open. The Saban Onsagar Rider, which is basically a lion, for kind of an equivalent. It's and that's in the Kasani, and it's just so bold looking. I love it. But yeah, other than that, thanks for coming on. I know it's late for you.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's been a pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for letting me ramble so much.
Well, that's kind of how we like to run the show. This was technically the Mike Thorpe episode for you to say whatever it is you want to say. So
there we go.
There you go. You got a chance to ramble on about Anyaral, and we got to ogle at some really cool looking miniatures, and we definitely want to see this one put on the table in the near future.
Great.
All right. Well then, thank you, and have a good night.
It's been a great introduction to the podcast.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Skirmish Supremacy. To see more of the antics that Nick and I do, you can check us out on Facebook at Skirmish Supremacy. We also have Twitter, which we can be reached at Skirmish Supreme, because apparently Skirmish Supremacy does not fit in Twitter. And if you want to email us directly, you can reach us at tim@skirmishsupremacy.com or nick@skirmishsupremacy.com. Thanks for listening.